was just a day that I never expected. For many people who may not know, I ran for office for the first time ever for any office in 2018. I left behind a very different career in the wake of the 2016 election. There was a video that went viral, well before any of mine ever did, of middle schoolers chanting "Build that wall" at another middle schooler. And that video was from Royal Oak Middle School, which was my polling place in the 2016 election. So I saw that just a few days after standing in line to vote for who I hoped would be our first woman president. And the fact that these were kids, it really just broke me. There was something about the fact that this man and this kind of shift in the Republican Party had normalized targeting and demonizing kids, especially kids who looked or sounded different. It was just devastating to me. So I Googled how to run for office. I have never done this before. My career background, as was mentioned, I'm a Notre Dame grad. I was a car designer. I never had plans to get into this line of work, but I knew that we had to do something different. And I lead with that only to say, I know that some people may have seen me on TV over the past year and think, oh, well, she's, in a Democratic area. She's always done this. No, I flipped a Republican district against a Republican incumbent when I ran for office for the first time in 2018. I ran against Marty Nolenberg, the son of Joe Nolenberg, who was a member of Congress for 16 years. Very well known here in my first 4 years in office. I represented Mitt Romney's hometown. So I say that to say we can run and win anywhere and everywhere. When I first filed to run for office, especially against an incumbent in Oakland County, I had even members of our county Democratic Party take a meeting with me and then tell me to my face, "That's cute. You're going to get destroyed, but don't worry, you can build your name recognition and run for city council next time." So that's how I got here. So in my first few years in the legislature, especially because I had flipped a district, I had beaten an incumbent, and if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm not shy. I was ostracized. So in my first 4 years, I introduced 49 bills on every single issue that I ran on. The Republican majority decided to give me exactly 0 hearings. So not only did I not pass a single bill into law, I never even got a hearing on anything. And they did that intentionally so that when I was up for reelection, they could send out mailers saying that, I was completely incompetent and not effective, and they could try to take my seat back. So that was already really frustrating 3 years into this job. And then the redistricting process happened, and I was drawn into a district with a Democratic colleague. So my district changed from an Oakland County district to a district that consisted of a significant portion of the city of Detroit and Oakland County. And I have to be honest with all of you, after 3 years of just getting stonewalled every single step of the way, I really was in a dark place. I felt like I had let everybody down who had volunteered for me and donated to me and supported me. I was now in a place where I was going to run against somebody who I agreed with on most issues and somebody who I genuinely liked as a person. So I was already in a place where I wasn't sure that I was going to run for reelection. And then I woke up to this email, and I was trying to figure out how to respond to a woman effectively accusing me, the mom of a young daughter, my daughter is now almost 3, of being a child molester. I was shocked all day. I tried to kind of go about my day and not let it get to me. But I was visiting a high school in my district and was meeting with, 15, 16, 17-year olds who usually don't know who their state senator is. But they stayed after school and they met with me. And usually meetings with high schoolers are not that controversial. They ask about how you got into this work and if you have any internships. And this was different. We had really engaged young people who were horrified about what was happening in our state and what was happening in our country. We had a young woman who asked what we were going to do if Roe versus Wade got overturned. This was before that had happened, but I think young people knew what we all knew, which was the writing was on the wall. And we had a 15-year-old girl who raised her hand and she asked why there were all these bills targeting the LGBTQ community. And she finally said, I'm gay. Why does my state hate me? And it was that moment where I kind of recognized that the attack on me isn't really an attack on me. I'm fine. But if you are this 15-year-old girl in Michigan who's just trying to figure things out, you feel like you're under attack. So I was already in this mindset of, I'm not sure I'm going to run again, but if I can do something to stand up for this 15-year-old girl, then I might as well try. So my mindset was, if I'm going out, I might as well go out swinging. So I stayed up all night. I started writing what I was going to write in response. And initially, I started writing about the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. This was a time where Lee Chatfield, who was our Speaker of the House, was recently under investigation for being accused of grooming and raping his sister in law, starting when she was 15. Horrific. But I realized that if I wrote that down and I said Republicans X, that people wouldn't listen. It would just be political noise. It would be Republicans accusing Democrats of one thing and Democrats accusing Republicans of another thing. This was also, I mean, thinking about a very purple district that I represent, I've talked to a lot of people in my time in the legislature who probably didn't vote for me, didn't necessarily agree with me, but they were my constituents. So there was a mom who had called me a few months earlier who had been really frustrated with the school closures and the communication with her school administration during COVID-19 about learning loss, about how hard it was for working moms. So she had joined a parents group because she wanted a way to kind of push back and have her voice heard. But the reason she called me was because this parents group that she had joined had initially started talking about ways to kind of go after the administration, but then they had shifted and they were targeting the LGBTQ community and they were talking about critical race theory and attacking DEI. And the reason she called me is she said, I'm not this person, but I also don't feel like I have a voice. So, with all of this kind of in my mind, what I started writing down and erasing and writing down again was thinking about this woman and this 15-year-old girl and thinking about my own background. And I started talking about myself. I identified myself in the speech as a straight white Christian married suburban mom who knows that hate will only win when people like me stand by and let it happen. I talked about the fact that I grew up in the church and that my mom taught CCD, which is the Catholic version of Sunday school. That, you know, the fact that we have seen Christianity and faith weaponized to hurt other people is not the Christianity that I knew. And I feel like so many of us who are Democrats have really ceded the ground on what faith and religion means, especially if we have a complicated relationship with religion and faith, which I think a lot of us do. So I really stood up and I gave this speech to reclaim my own identity, but thinking about this mom as a way to say, you and I are the same. And there is another way forward. We do not have to put people down. We do not have to target marginalized kids. We can look out for each other and we can move forward. So I gave this speech on the Senate floor. Nobody watches the Michigan Senate session at all. So I didn't think anything would happen to it. But I put it up online. And within 24 hours, 12 million people had seen it. By that night, I was on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, who called me liberal Karen with a headband. So that's how you know I made it. A few days later, I got a call from the president and I missed it, which was horribly embarrassing. I was putting my daughter to bed and I hadn't brought my cell phone into the room. And I tell that story and people think, oh, you're such a good mom. You don't have screen time in front of your daughter. And the reality is I always just leave my phone in her room. So I've learned not to bring it in there. But anyway, the president left a voicemail and he said, Mallory, it's Joe Biden. the president, as if I wouldn't know. And we talked that week, and he's very funny, much funnier than I think I expected. And when we finally talked, he said, I've been in this work a lot longer than you have. I've been in this for about 700 years. And he told me he's never seen things this bad, as somebody who was also raised Catholic and always believed that we could find common ground, that's not what we're seeing right now. And I decided to try to do something with it. So I gave this speech, and then 2 weeks later, we were still getting nonstop phone calls and emails and interview requests. We had an interview request come to my office from Good Morning America, from the producers, who called and said, "We want an exclusive with Mallory." And my chief of staff said, "Hi, I'm from Lansing, Michigan. What does that mean? Like, I don't know what that means." But I sort of recognized in that moment, this can either be 15 minutes of fame that I didn't want and certainly didn't ask for, or we can grab the microphone, grab the spotlight, and do something with it. So I opened a pack called A More Perfect Michigan. I brought on a team of consultants, including an advisor and a fundraiser from Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign. And we set out with the singular goal of flipping the legislature. So, fun fact, campaign finance laws mean that everything is public. So I was really devastatingly curious how much it was worth for my Republican colleague to effectively accuse me of being a child molester. And we saw her report come out, and we saw that she had raised $235. There are no zeros missing from that. That was it. And from April to November, I raised $2.5 million for candidates all around the state of Michigan. I went up north, I went up into Marquette, I was in Traverse City, I was in Macomb County. The fact that we now have 3 state senators representing Macomb County would be unheard of even a few years ago. I was downriver, I was on the west side of the state, and we flipped the legislature for the first time. Democratic trifecta, first one in my entire lifetime, and I'm really proud to have played a part in that. And I now have the privilege and opportunity, because of this speech and kind of the notoriety, I get to travel the country. I have spoken to the Indiana Democratic Party and the Oklahoma Democratic Party. The NHL invited me to talk about how they can navigate making sure that all their games are inclusive for people. I talked to the National Association of Park Rangers. It's just been like an incredible experience. But political pundits constantly ask me, what was it about Michigan in 2022? Was it Prop 3? Was it the governor's race? And I think that there were a lot of pieces that worked together to give us this moment. We had the Independent Redistricting Commission that gave us a fair chance. We had Prop 3. But I think more than anything else, Michiganders are decent, kind people. And when they saw the choices between moving forward or relitigating the 2020 election, living in this like conspiracy theory driven world where you were targeting 0.02% of the population, I think the reality is most people have never met a trans person that they know of. So to target and make you afraid of something that you may not even know is just, people saw through it. And that is a message that we got out everywhere. As somebody who was raised Catholic, I think going around the state and talking about abortion in a way that finally got out of the rhetoric that we've been stuck in for so long, that it's either, quote unquote, abortion on demand or your baby killers, and to talk to people about how hard it is to get pregnant and stay pregnant safely, about all of the ways that it can and does go wrong, and that you deserve medical care no matter what, was a really effective way for us to work. So we have a lot to celebrate this year in our new majority. I was just at the White House this past week as a member of the legislature for the first meeting of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. So I got to meet with the vice president and members of legislatures all around the country. And hearing from legislators, I met the Tennessee Three. If any of you saw, what was happening down in Tennessee, with the two Black legislators who were expelled from their legislature for daring to stand with protesters advocating for gun violence reform. Um, Michigan is on the map because legislators are looking at us. You know, we have a two-seat majority in the state house and the state senate. We could have been really shy about that and played it safe, but we didn't, because we know that this is a moment we may never have again, and we know that people are expecting a lot of us. So we passed more bills into law in our first 6 months than the past six legislatures combined, which is wild. We were very busy. And we touched on a lot of things. I think we are writing a roadmap for Democrats all across the country that we can and must do economic and social issues and show that they're connected. We expanded the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to explicitly protect LGBTQ Michiganders, as well as passing the Crown Act, which prevents discrimination based on natural hairstyles, which tends to impact the Black community more than anybody else. We have also passed the largest tax break for seniors in state history by repealing the retirement tax that Governor Snyder put on seniors to give a huge tax break to corporations. And we expanded the working families tax credit to lift 700,000 families out of working poverty. So we're showing that all these things are connected. We don't have to choose between kind of social justice issues and economic issues. They are one and the same. And people are watching us. It's really exciting. So I am just so happy to be with all of you. I'm happy to take any questions. It has been genuinely the honor of a lifetime. I have to tell you, when we were passing Elliott Larson, I'm going to cry thinking about it. We did it such a long time ago. Especially after hearing some of the stories that I've heard. I was down giving a talk in Florida, and I met with a mom of a trans daughter. They're afraid for their life. They don't know where to go. They don't know how safe it's going to be anywhere. It's a life or death situation in some states right now. The same is true for access to abortion and reproductive rights. So when we passed the amendment to Elliott Larson to expand our civil rights protections, we in the Senate, we took a pause, and Jeremy Moss, who is the president pro tem of the Senate, he is our first and only openly gay state senator. He got to go up to the rostrum and preside over the final vote. And I cannot even explain to you what it feels like to grant people basic civil rights. I was like a puddle of tears in the corner. That's what we're doing in Michigan. Like we are a beacon of hope right now. We are getting calls from all over the country. I am of people who want to move here. They want to start a life here. I got a call from a teacher in New York who New York is too expensive right now, but she looks at a place like Michigan and everything we're doing, and she's like, this is a place that aligns with my values, but that I can afford to have the life I want. That family in Florida, they want to move up here. There was a story just today. Michigan's population grew for the first time in many years, thanks to immigrants who are coming to Michigan, which is a key part of our history, is immigration and giving people an opportunity to start a life not only in our state, but in our country. So we're on a really exciting path. I know that it doesn't always feel that way when you are in an area where a lot of your representatives may be solidly Republican in solidly Republican areas, but this works. What we saw in this election cycle all around the country is that this message of decency and fighting the culture wars and moving forward is working. So however bad you see the polls are about the presidential race, I can tell you, my mom lives in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is a massive battleground state. This is a county where Moms for Liberty had taken over the entire school board of their school district. The ACLU sued my mom's school district where she lives. So my mom has become a frequent speech giver at school board meetings, which has been very sweet. She was inspired by my work, and now she's come out of retirement. And in a few weeks ago in the elections, Democrats swept the entire school board. They kicked 5 people out, and they run everything. So they are overturning all the book banning, the anti-LGBTQ efforts. It's working everywhere. So I can't thank you enough for all the work that you're doing. I know it feels really hard sometimes, but we are the state that everybody around the country is looking to as the shining light right now. And that is something that I don't take for granted and that we couldn't do without any of you. So hopefully that's a really great holiday message. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments as we go into what I'm excited about is going to be a 2024 where we do it again and we prove everybody wrong because Michigan is a place where decency wins.
Thanks. A couple of questions. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Tim Peterson, Zoom host and Village Council Cassopolis. Just read in the news this today that poverty rates went up in Michigan this year, despite all the good economic news. Poverty rates are up. What will the legislature be doing in the next year to address this?
That's a great question. And, it is something when I read that it's devastating to read. That is a lagging indicator. I think the reality is we've had 40 years in this state of Republican leadership trying to cut our way to prosperity. So we've cut funding for roads, we've cut funding for schools, we've cut funding for education. So in the Midwest, we are last in terms of the number of residents who have some post-secondary education. And what we're seeing now in terms of job prospects, career prospects, and economic prospects is while a generation ago, the reality was you could get a great job without a college degree. That is less and less likely now. So we have started to make efforts to increase access to community college, post-secondary degrees. The legislature expanded access to the Michigan Reconnect program, which is a great program. If you don't know about it, the state of Michigan will pay for you to have a full ride for a community college degree if you were somebody who, let's say, started your degree, life got in the way, you stopped, you couldn't afford it. Previously, this program was available for anybody 25 and up. We expanded it because it was so wildly popular and successful to now anybody 21 and up is eligible. So please tell everybody you know in your network, Michigan Reconnect, you can have a free guaranteed post-secondary degree or certificate for any trade school, community college, or apprenticeship program. So that's one thing we're doing. We have also seen right now there are multiple efforts to raise the minimum wage. Before I was a legislator, I collected signatures for the One Fair Wage ballot initiative that was on in 2018. We got enough signatures for it. The Republican-led legislature at the time used a procedural move to adopt and amend that initiative. So the way that ballot initiatives work in the state of Michigan, if you collect enough signatures, the legislature has the first crack at it. So they have the opportunity to adopt that ballot initiative, or they could choose to send it to the ballot. The Republicans did something that the state Supreme Court just ruled as unconstitutional. So instead of adopting the language as it was written, they adopted it and then they gutted it. So they amended it to hack our minimum wage down to basically effectively poverty levels. So we should have a ruling any day now from the state Supreme Court on whether they're going to rule that invalid. If they rule that move invalid, then our minimum wage will immediately go up to match the intent of the original ballot initiative. So we've been waiting on that in the legislature. Some people have asked us, why haven't you done anything on the minimum wage? We knew this was working its way through the courts. So we should have news on that any day now. Beyond that, I mentioned the working families tax credit that's lifting 700,000 families out of poverty. So that number is the lagging indicator of where we're at right now. Take that number minus 700,000. So we are slowly chipping away. It's going to take some time, but overall, our goal is to make sure that everybody in the state has equal quality to education, advantage to great careers. Something that I'm very passionate about is public transit. Having access to a job doesn't mean anything if you can't get there. So we have a lot more work to do. But I think what we've started to do in our first year in the majority is starting to chip away at that. So hopefully we saw the first good news in the first census report that reverses our population decline trend. This is the first year where our population ticked up in quite some time. So hopefully next year and in the years after that, we'll see the poverty rate indicators change as well.
Good, thanks. Good answer. Short answer.
Thank you.
Everything you did this year is going to come to fruition next year, and we'll start to see those numbers go down. So
Exactly.
something really close to home. We know where you're at in Royal Oak. Oakland County, you've got friends on both sides, very strong, passionate friends. This Israel-Hamas conflict is just really wreaking havoc with our Democrat friends. You're, like I said, you've got friends on both sides. What should the Democrat Party, good Democrats like this room is full of, be doing about the Israel-Hamas conflict? And do you see, a role for leadership such as yourself to talk that could talk to both sides? Talk a little bit about that, where your thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, especially here in Metro Detroit, I think we have the largest Arab American and Jewish populations living side by side of anywhere in the country. My husband is Jewish. My daughter has an Israeli name. Her name is Noah. Um, it's been really hard. So since October 7th, I have had complete strangers reach out to me. One woman who I do not know say that my daughter should be dead because she has an Israeli name. Um, and that's just the rhetoric of where this issue has gotten to. Now, the reality is for our Arab American residents, I talk to so many people who, if not old enough, their parents are, who remember how hard it was in the United States post 9/11 when we saw Islamophobia, attacks on the American community rise, hate rise. And what I've been trying to do here is to bridge gaps and have a conversation because we can't control what happens in the Middle East. We have to separate, there's a difference between Palestinians and Hamas and Jews and Benjamin Netanyahu. Those are different things. Leadership in the two countries is not reflective of the people who live in those countries. But my biggest fear is that we are watching one of the most horrific wars we've ever seen in a time when we have 24/7 real time access to social media, to videos. We don't know what's true. We don't know what's not true. And there's this moment where, because of access to social media, people feel like they have to respond and they have to respond immediately. So, what I've been encouraging people to do is take a moment and pause. One of my best friends, who is Palestinian, she's a social worker, and she and I were talking about this recently. One of the hardest things is I don't think people have had time to pause and process this because it's happening so fast and it's in our face all the time. So I know Debbie Dingell, who she represented Dearborn for much of her congressional career. She now represents the University of Michigan. She's been hosting a lot of not announced. What she's been telling students is do not tell them that I'm here because then it will turn into a protest. But hosting conversations with students, with staff, with administrators, just to talk to each other and try to recognize that it can feel really helpless watching what's happening in the Middle East right now. We can't let that divide us at home. I think one of the most beautiful things about Michigan is the fact that we have these diverse communities living side by side. I don't think it's helpful when you have Democrats and political pundits telling Arab Americans that uh, their frustration with the president right now is going to elect Donald Trump. People are not stupid, right? Like, you're looking for an avenue to express frustration as we get closer and closer to the general election. You're going to have to make a binary choice. But that's my hope. I think as Democrats, as the Democratic Party, the more that we can do to just facilitate talking to each other and talking to each other in a way where you're not having to post on social media or pick one side or another. Um, because for us at home, there isn't a side. We live together every single day. We live together in a way where we have to coexist. We are neighbors. We are members of the same state. And I think that that's what we should all try to do. That's what I'm trying to do is sit down with people on either side of this issue, bring my own experience as somebody who is married to a Jewish man and half part of a Jewish family, to bring that experience because there are some rightful fears of watching, you know, some of these calls that are getting very violent. Um, Everybody's afraid. And the more that we can give space to people to be together in a way that isn't going to threaten them, I think we're going to be okay. It's a hard thing to do.
For that answer. Monday night, there was a 5:30 Zoom with a lot of Democratic leadership. our governor, our senior senator, Speaker Tate, Leader Brinks, and the chair of the Democratic Party. And I saw this come up a couple of times in the chat. So somebody jotted down a question. I'm compelled to read it. Should something happen between now and the primaries and the caucuses, what are your thoughts on Gretchen Whitmer for president?
So I was invited onto David Axelrod's podcast. David Axelrod made a lot of news for, basically saying that the president is too old to run. Here's my view on this, and this is like a genuine thing. The more time we spend our energy on this conversation, the less time we're doing the work to elect Democrats. And here's what we saw in 2020. So in 2020, I sat down with Charlotte Alter. She's a reporter for Time. She was in Michigan. And she was asking me, she's like, do you have concerns because Biden doesn't have a campaign here? There's no infrastructure. Really, I think the only state that he had any organizing was South Carolina. And what I said even then was, it's a very different campaign. What I have seen the Biden campaign do that I think is a strength is they delegated a lot more to the county parties, the state parties, and the clubs. And here's a perfect example of that. The Oakland County Democratic Party was on the verge of bankruptcy, as many were during COVID, because they couldn't meet. A lot of the fundraising efforts went awry. The Biden-Harris administration gave OCDP the ability to print and create their own Biden-Harris yard signs, which were very hard to get at that time. We charged $25 each for those yard signs, and we would hand deliver them. Like, I would show up at your house and stick it in the yard. And you can't remember the exact number, but I think we raised something like $800,000 just off of selling yard signs. And what I told the reporter was, this was a good example of this campaign from a distance, like trusting the local organizers and the party to kind of execute on what we know we needed. So what I have been advising the administration, what I told David Axelrod when he asked me this question was, we have to draw a contrast. Whether or not Joe Biden runs for president is his decision and his decision alone. That's it. And we have to accept that. So we have to tell the story of the rest of the party. We have an incredible bench here in Michigan. Donald Trump is out there at all of his rallies telling all of his supporters that he, as sort of an authoritarian figure, he has quite literally said, I alone can do this. And anybody coming after me is coming after you. So what I think is the right thing for the Democratic Party to do, and Joe Biden, if Joe Biden decides he is in it and he's doing it, is to draw the contrast between Donald Trump as the authoritarian strongman figure and the Democrats as a team, especially in Michigan, because we have more of a diverse, dynamic team than anywhere else. We did this really well in 2020. I was in Flint, I was up north. We did full team campaigns. We had all of our people out. And I have to give the Biden campaign credit in 2020. They trusted us to lead a lot of the events. So that's my view. At the end of the day, it is the president's decision whether or not he's running again. If we are wasting our time on that conversation, we're wasting our time when we should be getting to work, like building excitement and showing the amazing bench that we have doing all this work, because it's not just about electing the president, it's about electing all of us.
Thank you for that answer. I'm old enough to remember Macomb County and Jimmy Carter running for re-election when some of us thought Kennedy was a better choice, and look what happened. We got Ronald Reagan and 8 years of Ronald Reagan and PATCO and destruction of unions, on and on and on and on. So that's all the questions I have here from the audience. I don't see any in the chat. Naomi, want to take it for a time?
Don't have any questions? Now's the time. Anybody online on Zoom, raise your hand if you have a question.
Oh,
thanks everybody for joining online. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So here's a question from the chat. An hour ago, New York Times announced that Colorado, yes, a great announcement from Colorado. They found that Donald Trump should not appear on the primary ballot in Colorado. They found that he is guilty of insurrection against the United States of America. I think there was an attempt to do that here in Michigan. Not sure how that goes, but Are we gonna win by keeping him off the ballot? Or tied up in jail or tied up in the courtrooms? Is that how we're gonna win?
Man, I wish I could tell you that I was some prognosticator who would know how things go. It is like Donald Trump. This is a controversial thing to say in Michigan. I am not a native Michigander. Don't hold that against me. I was born and raised in New Jersey. So, as a native New Jerseyan, we knew Donald Trump as the man who bankrupted Atlantic City. He was a terrible businessman. I was a bartender. So, in New Jersey, you can get your bartending license when you are 16. So, I did that when I was home from college. I bartended at a bar down the street from the Bedminster Golf Course. So, I bartended for the Trump kids, and they were horrendous and they never tipped. So, I've got a personal grudge. But the wild thing to me is that every effort, whether it's taking him to court, whether it's going to jail, whether it's, this effort to keep him on the ballot, somehow he uses that to his benefit and it makes him stronger and it drives me insane. So I don't know. I wish I could tell you I know how this is going to go. I know the Colorado Secretary of State well. I haven't called her since this news happened. I am dying to just to find out like how that's going. I
stay on the ballot. I know that they have appealed it. I don't know how that's going to go, but that's what I know at this point. But like I said, I wish I could tell you some kind of magic ball, but every time I see something that I think is going to destroy him, it doesn't. And it drives me crazy because this was a man who sold bad steaks and had a fake university, and Atlantic City is like a shell of itself. I don't know what happened.
We're back to keep drawing the distinction between the Democrats that do the work, Democrats that get the job done, and Donald Trump never has worked in a day in his life. Well, again, that's all I see in chat. That's all I have here online.
All right.
I want to thank you again for being here. I'm glad we put this together. Thank you for taking your time. I'm awfully glad for technology, and best wishes to you.
Thank you. I'd love to come visit in person sometime. That is a lot easier when I am not the mom of a very small child. So when I have when she's a little bit older and she's ready for road trips.
Bring her over here this summer. Cass County has almost as many lakes as Oakland County, believe it or not.
Love it.
And most of them are largely undeveloped, but we've got beautiful beaches and great local scenery and things like that. So we look forward to seeing you around Dowagiac. Say Dowagiac.
Yep.
You can pronounce
Dowagiac. Got it.
There we go. Good job.
Practice.
And we'll see you again. Thank you, Emily, for putting this together. Thank you, Julie Dye. Let's give Julie Dye for inviting her and getting her attention and getting her over here. And please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for inspiring us for the new year.
Thanks, everybody. Rest up, get your rest over the next few weeks, and let's go do it again. 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So all of you online, we're going to go back to the party and wish you were here. Good night.
Jim, can I talk to you for a minute?
Well,
Jim,
Is that Zane? That's Barb.
it's Zane. Hey, I thought what Mallory had to say was really inspiring. Is it possible? I mean, I know a few people that would